Hey everyone, before we begin, I just wanted to share a quick little life hack with all of you that I just learned. If you're ever feeling cold, just go stand in the corner. Right angles are always 90 degrees. Welcome to the very first episode of The Human Experience. I'm really excited about this video because it also marks the start of my series on ancient world religions and how their influences can still be felt to this day. Initially, I was intending to release this episode all in one large video, but I realized through the course of editing that there's just way too much footage for that. So I decided to split this video into 3 parts, which will be released over the coming weeks, and I'll probably do the same and split future videos into parts as well. This episode is all about ancient Mesopotamia, one of the very first human civilizations. In the following episodes, we'll get into all of the fun details of the religions, mythology, and even some conspiracy theories that have come from the beliefs of ancient Mesopotamia. But in today's episode, I wanted to lay a very solid foundation and explain just why Mesopotamia is so important in human history. So enough introductions, let's go. Why is Mesopotamia so important in human history? Well, Mesopotamia was one of the very first civilizations. Through archaeological records, we've seen that civilization began to develop in a few different areas in the ancient world. Primarily Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley in India. Mesopotamia is also referred to as the Fertile Crescent and the Cradle of Civilization. The region is located in the modern-day Middle East. It follows the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, and it lies between the Mediterranean Sea and the Gulf of Persia. This region is also, according to the Bible, where God created the first humans in the Garden of Eden. Though there is earlier evidence of human life in other parts of the world, as I said, this is really where civilization was born. The first cities were built here, in addition to a number of extremely important scientific and academic discoveries and inventions. Not only was the wheel invented here, one of the most important inventions of all of history, but also other very important academic studies and inventions, from everything to horseback riding, sailing, astronomy, mathematics, timekeeping, map-making. The list really goes on and on. These people were very intelligent and the initial developers of some of the founding sciences. So it's really thanks to them that we have the base understandings of the world around us. This is also where written language was invented, or at least the oldest surviving pieces of written human language. Which of the discoveries or inventions made by the ancient Mesopotamians are you most thankful for? Let me know down in the comments. In 14,000 BCE, the first settlers were making their way into Mesopotamia. They lived in small communities of circular houses. These first settlers were called the Sumerians. And interestingly, it's unknown where these people actually came from. Their language wasn't related to any other known human language either. There are only a very small number of languages in all of human history that don't share a common ancestor with other languages. But ancient Sumerian is one of those. No one knows where the people came from or who they were related to. It's one of history's first mysteries. By 9000 BC, the settlers of Mesopotamia were practicing some rather advanced farming techniques, everything from animal husbandry to irrigation. And around 3200 BC, the first city in the world had been built, Uruk. Estimates vary, but Uruk was home to somewhere between 50 and 60,000 people. Now, by today's standards, that doesn't sound like much at all. It's hardly even a city. But think about how many people were alive 5,000 years ago. A lot less than there are today. Estimates vary, but scientists think that there were only somewhere around 14 million people alive on the entire planet. So when you do the math, you realize that the city of Uruk housed about 0.357% of the human population. Now again, that sounds like a tiny, tiny little number, but doing the math on, say, New York City, you realize that New York today, the largest city in the United States, makes up only 0.239% of the human population. Considerably smaller, at least percentage-wise, than the number of people who were living in Uruk 5,000 years ago. So this wasn't just some tiny little burg nestled away that nobody really knew about. This was the center of trade and commercialism in the entire world at the time. Because of that, you'd be very hard-pressed to find a civilization that hasn't been affected by the Mesopotamian peoples, at least in some way. Not only scientifically, as we talked about through all of their developments and inventions, but also religiously and belief-wise. Uruk is also host to the famous Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories ever written and the oldest surviving legend of a global flood. Many modern-day scholars believe that quite a few biblical accounts were inspired by the Epic of Gilgamesh, but we'll save that topic for another video. The Epic of Gilgamesh is considered to be one of the oldest works of religious literature, and it had an influence on pretty much the entire ancient world. I'd recommend you check out the writings of Joseph Campbell if you'd like to learn more about how the Epic of Gilgamesh has influenced almost every work of fiction ever since. Being that nearly all of humanity has ties back to the Sumerian people and Mesopotamia somewhere in history, it shouldn't be surprising the far-reaching effects that we see, not only in religion, but also, as we mentioned, in science and development. Sumerian religion and myth have even influenced modern-day pop culture. Due to the fact that they believed in demons and evil spirits, these influences are especially seen in horror films. Everything from Wishmaster to The Evil Dead contain references to Sumerian mythology. Groovy. Really, we owe the Sumerians a lot. Without them, we wouldn't have books to preserve communication for future generations. This invention is especially important because it marks a clear distinction in history. Before writing was invented, we refer to usually as prehistory, and after the invention of writing as history. So why is there that important distinction? Well, everything that happened before things were written and recorded is subject to a lot of speculation, and it's very easy to filter things through the lens of modern-day society. All of us come with our own presupposed notions and ideas, and it's really hard to divorce that from the reality in front of us and understand what things may have been used for back in ancient times. For example, we can look at Stonehenge and make all sorts of educated guesses about what it was used for and who was using it, but it would be another thing entirely if someone found a document that clearly explained who was using it, what the purpose of it was, when, why, and how. It would clear up a lot of mysteries that right now we can only make guesses about. So that's why there's such an important distinction between these two periods, before and after writing was invented. It's very hard to determine what the religious practices and belief system of any culture were before the invention of writing. In fact, the Mesopotamian religion is not the first religion practiced by humans. From what we know of archaeology, actually the first religions were formed in the Indus Valley and eventually became modern-day Hinduism. But because these traditions were passed down orally and not actually written down or recorded until long after the fall of the Sumerian and Akkadian empires, much of what we know about them is, again, relegated to speculation and educated guesses. There's also evidence that the Egyptian religion and writing systems predate the Sumerian ones. However, the oldest surviving complete sentence in Egyptian is predated by the entirety of the Epic of Gilgamesh, a whole book. So, again, everything that we know pre-Sumerian is relegated to speculation. This is why we're analyzing Mesopotamia in our first episode, because without contemporary writings to help keep us in check, it can be very easy to allow our perception to be skewed and filter things through the lens of more advanced technologies and beliefs without some kind of contemporary writings to help us better understand the thought processes and belief systems of the ancient peoples. In other words, what we think may have been the purpose of an object could be completely different from what it was actually used for, especially when it comes to the nuances of religions that have been long extinct. So thanks to the invention of this writing system, we know that there were two main populations that settled in Mesopotamia. There were the Sumerians to the south and the Akkadians to the north. The Sumerians were really the first great civilization of Mesopotamia. The first great civilization on Earth. As I mentioned, it's kind of a mystery where the original Sumerian settlers came from. There is some speculation that maybe they came from the Zagros Mountains in the east or from somewhere else, but these people, we do know, came down into the valley and began to build. And boy, did they build. There were many city-states in Sumeria, like Uruk that we mentioned before. Each one was ruled by a designated prince and was under the patronage of its own god or goddess. There were some cities that were under the patronage of the same goddess, but many of them had their own unique ones. From this point on in filming, I was regularly visited by curious wasps who wanted to see what was going on. I returned the favor by promptly hunting them down and killing them each time I saw one. Oh, alright. It's time to kill this thing. Well, that's frustrating. Oh well. This civilization flourished for about 2,700 years until Sargon the Great rounded up a force of Akkadians and conquered all of Mesopotamia. His rule stretched out not only through Mesopotamia, but into Iraq, the Arabian Peninsula, and even into the Canaanite lands. But their influence could be felt from even further away. Sumerian and Akkadian influence can also be seen in ancient Egypt, reflected in their culture, architecture, and religion. For example, the mighty pyramids that everybody is familiar with are predated by about 2,000 years by the Sumerian ziggurats. There are even aspects of modern-day Christianity that are clearly influenced by Sumerian and Akkadian religion, but we'll get into that a little bit later. There you are. I'ma kill you, I'ma kill you. But like all great civilizations, the Akkadian Empire came to an end. And rather quickly, actually, only about 200 years after its founding. Why so fast? Well, an invading army escalated the tensions that were already existing through infighting in the government, and the final nail in the coffin was a severe drought that supposedly lasted for about 300 years. That ended the civilization and its greatness. He's back up for more. I'm going to stomp him to death. But from its ruins, the roots of the Assyrian and Babylonian empires were laid. Anyone who's familiar with the Old Testament of the Bible will recognize just how important the role those nations played in the development of the three Abrahamic faiths: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But we'll get to those later on. Another one? Really? Now that we've established just how important Mesopotamia was in human history and the impact that those cultures had on human development, I want to give you a little sneak peek for the next part of this video, and also lay some groundwork for the rest of the series. Almost all religions, regardless of their beliefs, share a number of common themes, and it's these shared themes that we'll be analyzing over the course of this series. Religious belief systems traditionally give answers to the big questions that science can't answer, at least not yet. What happens to us when we die? Is there a spirit realm, or anything beyond our mortal ability to perceive? How did the universe begin? How did humanity begin? Many religions also set up a code of conduct and traditions that they expect their followers to, well, follow. They also tend to include warnings about the end of the world or some kind of apocalyptic end time. Religions almost universally believe in some form of an afterlife and a part of the human consciousness that survives and continues to live after the body dies. These are all of the common themes that we'll look at, not only with the Mesopotamian religions, but throughout the rest of this series too. It's my suspicion that we'll start to see many interesting similarities between ancient and modern world religions, despite them being separated by vast distances and hundreds or even thousands of years. So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll get into all of the fun stuff, the religion and mythology of the Sumerian civilization, and you'll also get to see my ongoing battle with the wasps. That wraps up part 1 of our episode on ancient Mesopotamia. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that good stuff. Make sure to follow me on your favorite social media so you can stay up to date on future releases. And don't forget to check out the Patreon too, where you can join the secret Discord server. From there you can connect with the community, share your own insights, and debate on philosophical topics, suggest topics for future videos, and much more. I can't wait to see you there. And until next episode, see you on the flip side.